This is part 12 and probably the last in a series of videos in which I am repairing this HP9120A printer. In this series I completely stripped the unit down, carried out a number of repairs, made up some parts that were missing, replaced the belt, and had to make up a new cable for the printhead. In the previous video I left off getting the unit to start printing. Unfortunately the camera can't really pick the printing up very well. I think it's just the reflective nature of the paper. I would also say this is not the correct paper for this machine. It's although it's coated paper, it's really intended for a slightly different type of print technology. This paper is actually off an old Sinclair printer. I'll just cut it down in width to the right size for this printer, but the coating is not quite right, so the print quality won't be as good as it should be, but it should still be good enough to allow us to use the printer. What I've been doing since the last video is cleaning up the printhead. It's all working fine, all the paths through the cable are conducting, there's no problem there, and as I've been cleaning this up, the print quality has been improving quite dramatically. So I don't know how well this is coming out, but it's now quite good dark printing. So what I've been doing is cleaning up the printhead and adjusting it. So the adjustment, although you probably can't really see it, I'm just going to zoom in the camera and we'll have a closer look at this area. So the part we're interested in is the end of the fingers on the printhead. That's just where the tip of the screwdriver is, and they protrude past the end of this plastic moulding, and they need to be adjusted just so that as the printhead moves across the paper, they are just pulled away very slightly from the plastic moulding. They shouldn't bend too far. The tungsten is quite brittle, and if they bend too far then they will fail fairly quickly. But as long as they are moving just even very slightly, then the printer should work. So you're looking for probably a tenth of a millimetre or less gap between the fingers and the plastic housing when the housing moves across. So it wasn't printing very clearly, and that's just because the tips of the fingers were corroded and pitted. So I've been cleaning those up, and as I've been cleaning it, it's been improving. So the way I go about cleaning it is I drive the printer to its midpoint, as I've got it here, so it's now halfway through a print cycle. If you do this, make sure you turn the motor only in the correct direction. Do not turn it back the other way or you will destroy the printhead. So essentially, if you're turning it from the fan end of the motor, you turn it with the top of the fan towards the front of the machine. Do not turn it the other way. What I then do is take some 400 grit abrasive paper. I slide this very carefully between the printhead fingers and the rubber roller. It obviously has to go this direction. Do not try and pull it this way, or again you'll destroy the fingers. And then just pull it through very carefully, and do that a few times and it will clean the pitting and corrosion off the fingers of the printhead. Don't overdo it, you don't need to take too much material off. And I've just done that about sort of 20 times, and that's cleaned up the printhead. We'll finish off the print cycle just to get the head back into its home position. But as I say, this is not the correct paper for this printer, so it's not going to print perfectly, but it should certainly print better than it was. So we'll power this up, have a look at the printing, seeing if it's improved. Okay, so it's now back in its park position, so I can now put this cover back on. We'll power it up. I've got the calculator powered up. We'll power up the printer and we'll try and print the program that's currently in the calculator. And again, you probably can't see that clearly. As I say, for some reason the camera doesn't seem to pick this up very well, but it's now printing very clearly. I'll just stop the print. And the print quality on both sides of the paper is now actually very good. It is quite dark, as I say, for some reason the light is washing out what you're seeing, but in real life this let's turn this off. In real life this printing is now quite nice and dark, it's quite clear, and it works all the way across the paper, and I have checked to make sure that what's being printed is what is actually in the calculator memory, and it is correct. So the correct data values are coming through. We're getting good printing. This will clean up probably slightly more. Again, this paper is very old as well, so it does develop a bit of an oxide layer on it, and that again cuts down the conduction, which degrades the printing a little bit. But hopefully, as you can see, this is now printing reasonably well. It is quite nice and readable. I think that's as far as I'm going to go with cleaning the print head, and I'll let it clean itself up as it's used. Another change I've made, not really a change but an addition I've made to the printer, is this bar here, this green bar. I'll just move the camera across so you can see it a bit better. Okay, so this is just a piece of old PCB material, and the reason I put this here is on a few of these calculators that I've worked on, I've noticed that you start seeing marks. There's some on the board, you probably can't see them, but there's some scuffing on the PCB down here. And if we look at the original cable, again you probably can't see it, but there is scuffing on the cable at this point, and this is one of the areas where the cable is broken. Let's move this around a bit, you might be able to pick it up, but it's very hard getting this sort of thing on the camera. So in this area, along the bottom edge of the cable, there is some scuffing, and this is caused over time. The cables start flopping down, and they get caught when it's printing. They get caught behind these joints on the PCB. Now most of the time it just pops over. On a couple of occasions I've seen it snag and pulls fairly hard on the cable, and doesn't seem to do damage most of the time, but I'm sure that eventually it does cause damage to the cable, and something I want to avoid. So this is just kind of a little rest to stop the cable dropping down too far. The cable doesn't really touch it most of the time, so it's not really, there's a gap between this, it's not really touching, but if the cable flops about, it does prevent the cable going down too far and catching on the contacts on the board. Okay, so that's it for this printer. What I'm going to do now is refit the top cover. So I have cleaned the top cover, but I needed to make up some replacement catches. So the original ones had snapped. There should be a tab on the top of this. And so looking in cross section, that's the broken one, but it should look like that. So there should be a kind of a catch on the end. Normally they're wider at the tip, but with this newer material that I've used, it doesn't need to be as wide. And there is a general tendency, this sort of goes on, hooks over, and then there's a pin that goes into the hole in the corner of the base plate. And there's a tendency when people try and get these off to try and pull this tab back to release it. That's not really what you do. You take or loosen the two screws at the back of the printer, and then you tilt the entire case forwards and disengage these. You kind of disengage them by rocking them. You don't pull the tab forward. I will probably won't snap these ones off, but it certainly always seems to snap off the originals. So I'm going to refit the top cover. I'm going to put this onto the calculator and we'll see how it looks. Okay, so that's how it looks when it's fitted to the calculator. Nice, sleek. Let's turn it around so you can see from the side. Nice, sleek design. Very nice, very kind of modern for the time. Again, bear in mind this was designed back in the 1960s. So a very nice looking piece of kit. So what I'll do now is get some paper loaded into it, and we'll see if we can actually print. Okay, I've got some paper loaded. We'll turn the bench supply on, turn on the calculator. Okay, so the display's on. We'll check that we can power up the printer. So that's on. Should be able to feed some paper, which we can. And we'll now try and print the program listing. You notice the display on the calculator goes off. That's perfectly normal. It's using the same bit of code within the ROM to drive the printer characters that it does for the display characters, so it tends to blank the display. Okay, so I'll stop that, and hopefully, as you can see, it is printing. So it's getting clearer all the time. So every time I print and the head cleans up, it's getting clearer and clearer. And just turn it off. And so that's it for this particular printer. I have got another one of these to do, so I'll show a bit more detail of the printhead repair on that one, but the rest of it will be fairly similar to this. I haven't actually started working on that yet, so sometimes these videos come out and I've already completed a lot of the work before you see a various stage, but I haven't started the work on the second printer. If you want to see more detail of the work on the printhead, the mechanism, then leave a comment on this video. Otherwise I'll skip straight through and we'll just look at the printhead repair. But very nice looking unit. It's cleaned up nicely. The other printer is actually in slightly better condition, so hopefully will come up even better than this one. You'll notice that I didn't refit the original paper reel holders. They were broken off. So you can repair these. They're fairly easy to pin and glue up, but then you need reels that fit them. So instead what I've done is just made a couple of 3D printed inserts and an 8mm rod, and then I can use pretty much any size paper reel that I want. As I say, this is not the correct paper for this. This is old Sinclair printer paper, and I just cut it down to the 2.5-inch wide reels required for this particular machine. But that's this calculator now fully functional, fully restored. I've been carrying out a lot of testing on this. I still have some work to do on the card reader. I need to make up a replacement drive wheel for that. The one that was in this is obviously a replacement, and it doesn't really work very well, so I'll be making up a silicon replacement for that. I may post a video on that. It really depends on whether there's any interest. But other than that, this machine and the printer are now complete and fully functional. I just have to repeat the process on the second pair.